Ken Tasium, nicknamed Tace, was 22 years of age at the time of the accident. He was sleeping in the back of a van on September the 15th, 1979, when it was involved in a motor vehicle accident. Tace was thrown out of the van and sustained a fracture dislocation of C6, C7, resulting in complete C7 quadriplegia. Before learning to roll independently to either side, a quadriplegic usually starts with one knee bent up. The knee pulls the pelvis over, initiating trunk rotation. A progression is with the ankles crossed, making the patient initiate trunk rotation with his upper limbs. The further and final progression is when the patient should be able to roll to either side independently without any lower limb positioning. Bill Heindel was 33 years of age at the time of his accident. Bill dove into water which was only 2 to 4 feet deep on September the 25th, 1979. He sustained fractures of T10, L1, L2, and L3, fractures of T7 to 11 ribs, and had a right hemothorax. A complete paraplegia below T11 resulted. A paraplegic may start to roll in the same manner as a quadriplegic. However, notice how much easier it is for Bill to roll over than it was for Tace. Bill has a moderate amount of extensor spasticity, and he uses it to aid in rolling, first with his knee bent up, and then with his ankles crossed. Finally, he uses his spasticity to roll without using any lower limb positioning. The most common way a quadriplegic sits up from lying is from his side. Tace rolls onto his side, gets up on his forearm, and then must walk on his forearms towards his knees. As he gets closer to his knees, he grabs his legs with his left arm to help pull himself towards his legs. He then pulls on his left arm in order that his body weight can be taken off his right arm. Quickly, the right arm is straightened, allowing Tace to attain a sitting position. To scoot backwards, Tace places both arms back, lifts his buttocks up, and then pulls his hips backwards. It is easier if the entire movement is done quickly. To scoot forwards, he leans over his knees, lifts, and then pushes his hips forwards. The knees will bend up with scooting forwards, and therefore Tace must straighten them as he goes along. To scoot sideways, one hand should be away from the hip and the other hand close to the hip. The patient lifts and goes in the direction of the hand away from the hip. As the patient lifts, the head should be positioned over the opposite leg to the direction that he is going. This will put most of the body weight on the trailing buttock, making scooting sideways easier. Bill is able to obtain the sitting position two ways. The first way is usually the first way most paraplegics learn to sit up. Bill rolls onto his side and up onto his forearm. Notice Bill does not need to walk on his forearms like Tace. He can just straighten his arm from the side-lying position and go right into sitting. Once patients become stronger, they prefer to sit up by getting onto their forearms and then extending their arms. When Bill scoots forwards and backwards, notice how much easier it is for Bill than Tace. Bill cannot get into a good long sitting position due to his extensor spasticity. When he scoots sideways, he uses his spasticity to move his legs with his body. People with spinal cord injuries must relearn how to balance both in long sitting and over the edge of the high mat. To attain good balance in these positions, a fair length of time is required. When Tace balances in long sitting, notice how he must constantly work to maintain it. Any change in arm position increases the difficulty. Tace will now turn towards the camera. Notice that when Tace moves his arms, he is unable to maintain his balance, causing him to put his hands on the mat. Any patient needs good balance in long sitting before he can do activities of daily living, such as dressing. Tace will now move to the edge of the high mat and try balancing there. Because Tace is less confident sitting over the edge of the mat and balancing, I position myself behind him. Notice as he balances, he is more cautious and moves his arms into varying positions more slowly than when he was in long sitting. Tace will now turn sideways and repeat the exercise of balancing. Patients require good balance in sitting over the edge of the high mat in order that other activities of daily living, such as toilet transfers or transfers into another chair from their wheelchair, can be accomplished. When Bill balances in long sitting, he must maintain his body in a flexed position in order to diminish the extensor spasticity. That is why his knees are flexed as well. Notice that when Bill balances, he tries to keep his shoulders as far forward as possible. Balancing is much easier for Bill than for Tace, as you can tell by the confident way he moves his arms from one position to another. Before Bill balances again, after moving to face the camera, he pulls himself well forward to again try to diminish the extensor spasticity. Bill will now move forward to sit over the edge of the high mat. Notice how easily his legs go into extension. Before he can balance sitting over the edge of the mat, he must wait for the extensor spasticity to diminish and let his legs flex. Bill loses his balance more easily when sitting over the edge of the mat, but he can correct it much more easily than Tace. When he moves so we may see him from the side, notice again how Bill uses his spasticity to aid him. However, he again has to wait for the spasticity to diminish before he is able to balance. C7 quadriplegics such as Tace should be able to obtain a 4-point position. They roll on their side, pull their legs up into flexion, and then push themselves over and up into a 4-point position. Attaining a 4-point position for a quadriplegic requires considerable coordination, as they have no trunk muscles to help them. This functional activity is very good for teaching patients how to move their body from one position to another and how to control it in one position. Once the 4-point position is attained, they can do exercises such as balancing exercises or push-ups. Bill rolls over onto his stomach and then pushes up to a 4-point position. It is easier for Bill to move into a 4-point position from prone rather than sideline due to his spasticity. Balancing is again much easier for a paraplegic compared to a quadriplegic in this position. Therefore, Bill is able to do more balancing exercises and harder push-ups. Tace will now demonstrate a legs-up transfer. The chair should be slightly angled towards the high mat to decrease the distance between the chair and the mat that the person has to lift over. Tace removes his armrest and places it out of the way. He then uses his arms to move his buttocks forward in the chair in preparation for the transfer. One arm is hooked around the push arm to aid in balancing, while Tace lifts first one leg up and then the other. He straightens them out and then must get his shoulders positioned forward over his legs. He is now in a position to scoot forwards and sideways out of the chair. Notice the nice lifts that Tace manages while transferring. To transfer back into the chair, Tace scoots sideways and backwards, ensuring his buttocks do not hit the wheel. He then again hooks his arm around the push arm and lowers one leg down to the pedal. He repositions himself and then lowers his second leg down to the pedal. Repositioning occurs again until Tace feels comfortable in the chair. The armrest is then replaced. Bill will also demonstrate a legs-up transfer to the high mat. He removes his armrest. He moves himself slightly forward. He leans forward and lifts one leg up onto the mat. Bill has difficulty trying to get his legs up due to his spasticity. Because of this difficulty, Bill prefers to do a legs-down transfer. Notice the lift that Bill attains while transferring to the mat. When Bill lifts, he must wait until his spasticity relaxes before he can move over onto the mat. Bill makes sure his chair is slightly angled to the mat before transferring back. He is going to do a legs-down transfer going back to his chair. He moves his legs over and off the edge of the mat. He will try to position his foot on the pedal, but his spasticity takes over. Bill then transfers over to the chair and again positions his feet on the pedals. The armrest is replaced. And Bill repositions himself so he is comfortable. It is very important for a spinal cord patient to know how to shift his weight in the chair and to do it often to prevent pressure sores from occurring. Tace is able to do a straight push-up in his chair to shift his weight. Another way of changing positions is to hook one arm behind the push arm and pivot the body to a new position. A person can also shift his weight in the wheelchair by leaning forward. Before he does this, Tace moves his wheelchair so that the front casters are positioned so that the majority of the caster is in front of the axle. This will prevent the chair from tipping forward. He then lowers himself down over his legs. To get up, he uses the strength of his triceps as well as momentum. To shift positions, Bill also does a straight push-up. He can also lean forward over his legs to shift his weight. It is also important for the patients to know how to remove their pedals. Bill places his foot behind the pedal, swings the pedal to the side, and removes it. To replace his foot, he simply lifts it high enough to position it back on the pedal. To maneuver up a ramp, Tace must try to keep his shoulders forward in order to try and keep his body weight in front of the rear axle. This position will prevent the chair from tipping over backwards. Tace is just learning how to do wheelies. He is able to pop a wheelie, but unable to maintain his balance on a wheelie for long. I am spotting, not aiding Tace. A person can also shift his weight by obtaining and maintaining a wheelie. When Bill goes up a ramp, he is able to lean farther forward than Tace, and therefore is more confident and has more control of his wheelchair. Bill is able to pop a wheelie and balance for short periods. Before a person tries a curb, he must be able to pop a wheelie in order to get the front casters on top of the curb. Bill leans forward to prevent the wheelchair from tipping over backwards. The wheelchair is then rolled back, and Bill uses momentum and arm strength to get the rear wheels up. When Bill becomes proficient with curbs, he will be able to do a curb in one motion rather than breaking it into the two parts. To come down off the curb, Bill again leans forward to prevent the wheelchair from tipping over backwards, and then simply rolls back to bring the front casters down.